Okay, this is lesson 1-7, midpoint and distance in the coordinate plane. Our objectives today: to find the midpoint of a segment, to find the distance between 2 points in the coordinate plane. Those are it. So what we've got going on here is on a number line, the coordinate, let's get a pointer in here. So on a number line, the coordinate of the midpoint is the average or the mean of the coordinates of the endpoints. So we are just adding our two endpoints together and dividing by 2. So that's what we did in section 1-3. We talked about that coordinate. The endpoints are added together and we find their average. Now, in the coordinate plane, the coordinates of the midpoint are the average of the x coordinates and the average of the y coordinates. What? Well, we've got my endpoints, y1 and y2 here, of this segment. And if we really think about this here, and we find that midpoint, and someplace along this horizontal line, if we talk about it, would be our x point, but then we talk about our average of our x1 and x2, and we find that midpoint, and we find our midpoint of our segment that has the coordinates x sub 1, y sub 1, and x sub 2, y sub 2. So keeping in mind, given AB, where x sub 1, y sub 1, and B, x sub 2, y sub 2, the coordinates of the midpoint of segment AB are the average of your x's and the averages of your y's. Now let's check this out. Okay, so we're going to find the midpoint. AB has endpoints at -4 and 9. Okay, that's up here. What is the coordinates of its midpoint? Well, -4 plus 9 divided by 2. Well, -4 plus 9 is 5. Okay, and divide that by 2. We get ourselves a 2.5. Okay, just to double check for you all. So I've got some people looking at Bloom's. We got -4 plus 9. Enter, divide by 2. Hey, no way, it's 2.5. So over here at 2.5, which would be right about there because it goes up, is our midpoint for our segment AB. Now let's do a midpoint for segment EF, where E is 7, 2, and 5, -4. So I'm going to find my midpoint, my average of, and I'm going to subscript that so you guys start seeing that type of stuff. I'm going to talk about the midpoint of EF, segment EF, and that's going to give me 7 plus 2 divided by 2, and 5 plus -4 divided by 2. And that's all I'm doing. So I'm going at 4.5. And over here, I've got 1/2, more 0.5. However I'd like to do it. So I go over here at 4.5, 1, 2, 3, 4.5, and 1/2. It's right there. So that's my midpoint, M. Okay, that's all we're doing. The average of the x's, average of the y in two space, and in one space it's just the average of my endpoints. Sometimes we are given one endpoint and the other midpoint. Our job is to find the other endpoint. Okay. Now, this one's kind of interesting. There's a couple ways of doing it. We got a picture here. And the midpoint of CD is -2, 1. And one endpoint is C, -5, 7. And our midpoint is -2, 1. Now, our other endpoint. Let's talk about how far this distance is. If I were going to go on a walk, and I was just talking about my x values, from -5 to -2, how far did I go? Well, I started at -5 and I walked to -2, so I really added 3. Well, that's the midpoint. Well, I'm just going to add 3 more from the midpoint, and I find my other endpoint, which is +1. Okay, I'm going to do the same thing over here for my y's. I'm on a walk from 7 to 1. Well, I subtract 6. Well, it's a midpoint. I'm on a trip, and I'm going to subtract 6 more. So I'm going to subtract 6 more, and I'm going to get to negative 5. So it's 1, negative 5. Now I've got some folks out there going, no way, how can you do it that way? And I want to be sure that y'all understand what I did. We have a midpoint. Our midpoint happens to be negative 2, 1. And in order for us to do that, we have our x and y. So I have an x, and I'm going to add another x to it. I'm going to divide by 2, and I'm going to get negative 2. I have a y. Okay, I'm going to add another y to it. I'm going to divide by 2, and I get 1. Now, keep in mind, if I multiply both sides by 2 here in the green, I got negative 5 plus x equal negative 4. I'm going to add 5 and find out that x is 1. And that happened to be right there. That's crazy. And I do that for my y's. I multiply both sides by 2, so 7 plus y equals 2. Subtract 7, and I find myself at negative 5, and I'm there. And I was like, no way. And remember, the midpoint formula allowed me to do this because the midpoint is the average of my x's, x sub 1, x sub 2, the average of my y's, y sub 1 plus y sub 2 over 2, and that's my midpoint. Okay, so I just used the stuff I had in each one and plugged in my negative 5 and 7 accordingly. Now, it's your turn. The midpoint of segment AB has coordinates of 4, negative 9. The midpoint has 4, negative 9. Endpoint A has coordinates negative 3, negative 5. Find B. Bloom set it up. A way to help you do it fast. Go for it. Give it a try. Okay, now that you've given yourself a try, from negative 3 to 4, I added 7. Okay, I'm going to add 7 more and get to 11. From negative 5 to 9, negative 9, I subtracted 4. Well, I'm going to subtract 4 more and get to negative 13. And that should be my midpoint. Matter of fact, the people who decided to try the formula version of this had x plus negative 3 over 2 equal 4. And then they had their y plus negative 5 over 2 equal negative 9. And again, we got to multiply both sides by 2. X plus negative 3 equals 8. And I add 3 and x is 11. Crazy, that's the one that we got there. And I multiply by 2, y plus negative 5 equals negative 18. I add 5 and I get negative 13. That's another crazy one. But here's the thing. You have a choice. You can choose either one. Both work. Now, this next formula is very useful. Its key concept is distance formula. Now, when we're looking at this, the distance formula is the distance between 2 points, x sub 1 and y sub 1, and b is x sub 2, y sub 2. And I have my distance formula here. Remember, these subscripts are talking about the different y's. So, and I should probably do it this way. X sub 1, x sub 2, y sub 1, y sub 2. The difference of the y's from the different points and the difference of the x's are set up for us. Now, the distance formula is really based on the Pythagorean theorem. We'll study that later this year. Now, finding the distance. Round your answer to the nearest tenth. What's the distance between negative 7, 5, and 4, negative 3? Well, remember the distance formula was just written above us. Okay, the distance between 2 points. And by the way, I should probably write it this way. U V, because I'm telling you right there, the distance between U and V, okay? And I'm going to actually rewrite the formula. I got x sub 1 plus, minus x sub 2 squared. And I add that to y sub 1 minus y sub 2 quantity squared. Now, keeping in mind, when I'm doing this, I got the difference of my x's from the 2 points. And I don't know why I put a parenthesis in there. I want to subtract squared. And the difference of my y's, 5 minus a negative 3. Now, when I get to here, I've got negative 11 squared. So I'm just going to say it's 121. So that's what 11 squared is. And then I've got 5 minus a negative 3, which is 8, which is squared 64. And so I'm sitting here at 183. 185. So I got the square root of 185. Okay, I'm working through with this, and we're just going to double check because we got the calculator going on. So I've got -7, my -7. I'm minusing 4. Okay, and I get this, and I got -11. Okay, and then I'm looking at squaring that, so that's where my 121 comes in, and 64, 5, we're good. So I got 121 plus 64, and we get 185. I just wanted to make sure. I'm kind of sleepy today, getting things kicked off. Now, please keep in mind, I just did one. It is now your turn. Okay, so go ahead. I'll start you out. SR is equal to x sub 1 minus x sub 2 squared plus y sub 1 minus y sub 2 squared. Go for it. Turn me off, plug them in, evaluate, get it done, and turn me back on. Okay, welcome back. So now I've got -2 minus 3 squared plus 14 minus a -1 quantity squared. And I'm looking at -5 squared, which is 25. Plus, and now I've got 15 squared, which is 225. Okay, 15 squared, which is 225. And I'm looking at the square root of 250. Okay, when I'm done. And again, I can put those in my calculator and get that done. Okay, as you know, I could go 250, square root of that. Okay, it's going to be something ugly, 15.81, but I've got this, and I can figure that out. And it didn't tell me to put it to any particular thing, but we can put it in as 15.81. Okay, when we're done. And then the other one, just want to make sure, as we slide on here. Now, problem 4, finding distance. Okay, on a zip line course, you are harnessed to a cable that travels through the treetops. You can start at the platform A and zip to each other platform. How far do you travel from platform B? Okay, so we've got B and we've got C. So B here is -30, -20. So I've got -30, -20. And I got C, which is -15 and +10. So C is -15 and +10. Okay, when we do that. So I can plug this in the distance formula, so I can find BC. And that is going to be -30 minus -15 squared plus -20 minus 10 squared. And that's going to give us -15, which is 225. I don't need to put a parenthesis around that. So that's 225 plus 300 squared, -300, but squared is 900. And that'll give us an 1125. That's square root. Okay? And I just want to make sure that you recognize I can take the square root of that in my calculator if I need to. I can pop that in. So if I wanted to go 1125, raise that to the 0.5 power, we've got it 33.54. So I got 33.54. But when you're given a grid in a picture, it's really cool to be able to consider the fact that I can find it another way. So this is 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30. That's 30 there, and this is 15. And I could use Pythagorean theorem, a squared plus b squared equals c squared, which would be 30 squared plus 15 squared, which is the square root of that, is 900, and wow, that's 1125 as well, is equal to c. And again, that is still going to be 33.54. Now, keep in mind, the distance formula is derived from the Pythagorean theorem formula, so make sure that you recognize how they're connected. And finally, our summary. Use the lesson objectives in your notes to reflect on what we learned today. Objective today, to find the midpoint of the segment, to find the distance between the 2 points in the coordinate plane, and check off what you know. Okay, this one's kind of blank. I want to make sure that you have checked those things off as you go. Hope things are going well. Have a great day.